Welcome to the December 27th meetup of the PCR Coast Division. Couple of formal things this weekend. Wanted to talk about a couple of upcoming events that are on the schedule, and then a little bit about the modeling on the coast we're scheduling for in January. So with that in mind, first, happy holidays. Have a great 2026. Hope everyone had a wonderful holiday break over the Christmas holidays. And looking forward to 2026. I think it's going to be a fun year. So first, if you haven't registered, the PCR works with the Bay Area LD Ops group, the Layout Design and Operations SIG groups, to do an annual event. This year, it'll be at the South Bay Historical Railroad Society, which is in the Santa Clara Depot, January 31st to February 1st. Will also be available as a virtual event. So if you want to, you can register and go virtually, if not physically. They're doing it a little bit different this year. The operations will be on Saturday and the clinics will be on Sunday, kind of a reverse of the way it's been done in the past. So if you haven't signed up, go to Bay LD Ops, and go ahead and sign up there. It's there is a early bird fare through January 31st. So basically you have through till Wednesday to sign up and get the lower fare. The other event that I wanted to make everybody aware of is the PCR convention is coming up in Rohnert Park. It will be the week of April 30th to May 3rd. And that's a great event. I mean, if you look at what's going on the convention page, there's some exciting excursions going on. The Sturgeon Sawmill was a great tour. Did that 3 years ago. If you haven't been a chance, that's a great tour to go on. There'll be some great clinics and some great layout tours there. So some real opportunities for you to see some of the layouts and do something in the North Bay. And finally, we're going to do our next modeling on the coast on January 24th. We had a initial one, and Dave did a brilliant build on a car, some pictures of his car there. Basically, the idea is send a few slides in, just send them by email into coastsup23@gmail. We'll put them into a presentation, and it'll be an opportunity for you to talk about it. So we'll shoot for that on January 24th. So really, that's all I had. So I'm going to just throw it back open to general discussion and talking about the year that was, maybe a little bit about what we want to do in 2026 this year. Anyway, go ahead. I'll throw it open to anyone.
Yeah, I'd like to say, Phil, there's another event going on, and that is O-Scale West. For those of you folks that are aware of that, it's moved this year. It's now going to be, let's see, early March at the Portuguese Hall in Mountain View rather than at the convention center there. It's going to be much shorter. It'll be Friday afternoon and Saturday, so only a day and a half. And it'll feature the layout tours, sellers tables, clinics, and things of this sort. So if you're interested in that, you might want to sign up for that. The registration is much cheaper this year than it was last year. You can go to O-West on the web and find more information. One thing that I will say is one of the organizers contacted me, and they're looking for somebody to represent the NMRA at that meet. So if somebody doesn't have anything better to do, that would be it. I would do it, except there's a good chance I won't be there. So that's, or I won't be there in person, only virtually. So.
Yeah, I will be there because the CCC ON30 group is going to set up, I believe. So, yeah, we could set up a booth there if there's folks interested. We did that a few years ago, set up an NMRA kind of booth at O-Scale West. I don't know if we did it last year. I know I did it either last year or the year before. I don't remember exactly which. But you're right. It's a good event for O-Scale folks, whether you're a 3-railer or a 2-railer. The difference between 3-rail and 2-rail, once you start doing more scale scenery and structures, et cetera, is really about 5 degrees of separation. There's not that much difference when you look at it. So it's a great opportunity for anyone who's in O scale, where you've got the 7.2 times as much detail as HO scale. So
You
that's a
also,
good event. It's
you also
actually
have to you also have to remember you can see it
Yeah.
much better
As you
than
get,
N or even HO.
yeah.
yeah, it's actually March 7th and 8th,
Yeah.
which is
Really good.
Friday, Saturday, and in
Mountain View.
Mountain View. Yep. Yeah, I think the getting a hotel just became too much of a challenge. The hotels are pretty demanding in terms of what you have to commit to get a hotel these days. So we'll have to begin seeing what we do relative to our convention in a couple of years.
Mhm.
The good news is we still got a couple of years before we have to worry about it. So yeah, it's so some other things that I'm thinking about. I am talking to just kind of as a thought process, talking to Roaring Camp on the weekend of let me give you the dates here so everybody can kind of start thinking about it. It's why am I not seeing it here? Okay, it's actually the 11th and the 12th of April. So that's April 11th and April 12th. The ON30 CCON30 group is setting up at Roaring Camp in the event center. And we tried this a few years ago. There was a major storm and it all kind of fell apart. This year, the idea would be that we can set up to go see their steam up of the Heisler and the Heisler and the Shay that they use on the tourist railroad there. They do that steam up early in the morning, starting about 8:30, and then we do a shop tour probably about 10:30 ish. In the interim, we'd have some opportunity to go see the ON30 layout. Then I think they've got a 12 o'clock train, and they gave us a discount. It wasn't much of a discount, but there's an opportunity to take the 12 o'clock train, which runs up into the Redwoods. And then we'll have some, hopefully some open layouts in the afternoon. There are some pretty nice layouts down in that area, in the Santa Cruz area. So that would probably be that on April, I think it's the 11th is the date that it would do that Saturday, the 11th. So that's not formalized yet and finalized, but that's coming together. The other thing trying to figure out is when we want to have our meetup at the in the North Bay, and that probably is going to be more in February.
Mhm.
So I'm talking to the North Bay Golden State Model Railroad Museum about having a meetup up there, probably in sometime in mid-late February. So those are a couple of potential events coming up. Is there anything else anyone knows that would be really a good event to do this year that we should count on? Nobody wants to suggest anything if they know what the next words are going to be. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm from Utah, so I can only suggest things out of my area, and I don't think you guys want to come on.
There you go. No, it's a long trip. It's a long trip.
Yeah, we have a lot.
I mean,
we have a lot of clubs out here anyway, so we tend to not be short of people to display trains out here. That's pretty cool.
yeah. No. Well, you have in most of Utah, you have two of the attributes necessary for great model railroading, or the two key attributes:
What's that?
basements and lousy winter weather.
Right.
those are the key attributes, right? You got to have a basement to build a layout in, and lousy weather to keep you in the basement. So
Yeah, no, I grew up out there, and I grew up in Los Altos, and I just got kind of tired of the Silicon Valley by the mid 2000s and got out. But I moved to Reno, but now I'm in Utah, and the weather's different, and I definitely miss the temperate weather out there that you guys have.
yeah. Well, the difference is visiting snow versus living in snow.
Right. Yeah.
It's
I
a
don't mind.
very big difference.
I like snow. It's very cozy to me, but yeah, it does make for indoor activities, certainly.
Yep.
So forgive me for coming in later. Can I just ask real quick? I got the email. I'm actually I follow you guys because I used to be around the San Luis Obispo area, and really
Yep.
like your club. But what was the you talk about a North Bay meetup? Like I didn't realize you guys ran meetups up that far geographically distributed.
Well, so the Coast Division is basically the primary Bay Area. So we run up to the Straits, to the Carquinez, the river,
Yeah.
and run south. Basically, it runs south then and includes Monterey.
Well, I didn't
Um,
realize you covered that whole area, like that you were in charge of all that. That's really cool.
well, it's charge. That's a pretty much a euphemism right there.
Right. You're
So
talking.
yeah, it's basically it's the primary Bay Area is what the Coast Division is. So we try to do a North Bay event, and the problem is getting a facility outside of a model railroading club is a real challenge. There are some publicly available facilities. Most facilities around here want to charge, and the charges are pretty expensive for a day.
I
So
imagine.
we've been taking advantage of the Golden State Model Railroad Museum up in Richmond has a kind of a large, call it club room, but it's actually kind of a meeting room. And then the South Bay Road historical folks, which are in Santa Clara, and their depot have a large meeting room, and they actually have a back room that we can also do a clinic in.
Oh
So we've
wow.
been trying to do an event there, basically in the South Bay in September and in the North Bay in like February. So kind of opposite each other as kind of meetup events. And then we do the auctions in May and in December. So it kind of got that is kind of 4 scheduled events that are that kind of event, and then do some other events, like I said, like the going on a tour or going somewhere, that kind of thing that works out in the interim. So there are we've done a number of the what I'll call railroad organizations in the area. I think Niles Canyon is probably the other one we'd like to go back to this year, maybe during the summer.
Yeah, I'm really an idiot. I actually never got into railroading until I left the Bay Area, so I never did really. I've driven through Niles Canyon many times, but I never visited
Yep.
the rail. So that's
It's fun. It's a fun visit if you can go there and visit in the yard, and go to their bright side yards. And last time we did a shop tour and a yard tour and all the different pieces of equipment they have there, etc. And it's a fun trip.
now, do you guys ever go to Nevada? Like I have a relationship with the V&T Railroad. I do some. I'm like a contractor for them. I've known Tom for many years, and I don't know if you guys ever want to do a field trip up there or something.
Yeah, we haven't, but one of the things that's going to happen is I think the Sierra Division is going to do the PCR convention in 27 in
Oh,
Reno is I think
oh
the
wow.
plan.
Oh,
So
I'll be.
that'll be interesting because that'll open up all those kind of events and activities up in that area.
Well, that was
So
worth the price of it. That was worth the price of admission today to learn that that's in Reno. Because I'm like being in Utah, like going to California is a bit of a stretch for me now. I don't do it very often, but
Yeah,
going to
but
Reno, that's real. Yeah.
the Southern Pacific Historical Convention there in October of 24. And
Mhm.
it worked out very well to actually in Sparks at the casino. Casino license doesn't charge you as much.
Are you talking about the one that the N scale one from a couple years ago, or is this something different? There was an N scale convention that I went to in Reno or in Sparks at the Nugget, right?
The prototype SP people.
Oh, I misunderstood you. Okay, this was something different then. Wow. Well, that's cool. Well, there's certainly a lot more going on in the big.
That we use the Nugget in Sparks.
And they're cheaper for meeting space, you're saying?
I think so. No, you'd have to talk. We'd have to talk to the people and see if they came out ahead on that convention. But we had a great attendance, and it was sort of fun. I mean, you could overlooking the UP yard from 23 floors up.
Oh, you got to go. Yeah, yeah, right. When you get in the right room at the Nugget, yeah. Or there must be a. I
Yeah.
actually never really explored the Nugget to find if there's an observation deck, but I've certainly had rooms where I've had a view of the yard before. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I think they're still have reasonable rates. I think Las Vegas has gotten more crazy, but Reno still seems pretty reasonable. So
Well, if you talk to an old guy like me that used to live there 20 years ago, it's not reasonable anymore, but what went away was
right,
the cheap like buffet breakfast and stuff. You used to be
right.
able to, but yeah, but no, you're right.
So yeah, no, it's so that's one the options I think for us for next year is probably maybe to go back to Niles Canyon, looking at maybe doing something in Ardenwood, with around Jack Burgess, et cetera. So may do something there. Well, that'll probably be more in the summer. We'll be doing some planning around that.
The live steam group up on the Oakland Hills.
Yep. Well, we did that. Um, John Cockle's son actually works for Redwood Valley Railroad, and he set up for us to go do again a shop tour there, and then we did a train ride, and then we went down to the live steamers. Did that on a Saturday. I think that was quite a fun day to go see, and so I have to see. I haven't heard. I know Redwood Valley is the East Bay Parks are being kind of bozos about all this stuff. The Ardenwood folks are challenged with East Bay Parks as well. So I think East Bay Parks is being a challenge up in Berkeley also
Yeah, they are.
in terms of the Redwood Valley. I'm not real close to it. I've just heard that that's a rumor.
Yeah, Joyce was telling me that there's a new director again. And every time there's a new director, there's a review of everything and anything. And everybody reviews like crazy. And all of the Redwood folks, et cetera, run in circles. And then the director gets changed and they start all over again. But she was asking, in fact, I think I mentioned it at one of the other meets or someplace. We need to figure out a way or have a show of support for the Redwood, for the Redwood Valley guys up there. Whether it's a letter from us or whether something, I have to look into that to see how we can show our support of the activity.
Yeah, if you hear from Joyce, we'll put something out. We can all send
I'll do that.
a mail to whomever is the most influential person, whether it's your supervisor or somebody else. I don't know. It's a real challenge when you get the folks that start trying to debate whether or not it's a good use of resources to have a railroad focused activity. Sometimes it's a real challenge. So anybody doing any great modeling? Or have we all been just hanging out here over the holidays? All quiet on the Western Front. I'm doing a Banta warehouse kit. Actually, the new Banta kits. I don't know if you've done one. This is it's a warehouse. I haven't taken a lot of pictures. I'm not really doing it to do a build on it. He did my build on New Tracks a while back. Bill did of the kit. But what's amazing about these kits is that they have basically an interior box that is of just regular kind of, I call it laser wood kind of, but it's a little thicker. It's about maybe a 32nd inch thick, so it's fairly rigid, and it's cut where you just glues together as a box. And literally, you build the box of the building. It took me about not even an hour, maybe even half an hour to put together, and then you put laser cut wood, so it doesn't have stick wood. It's actually sheets of wood that's laser cut into strip wood, and you cut that out and then mount that on as the siding on the walls. It's a pretty amazingly an effective kit. Really easy to build and well laid out. So I bought it a long time ago when he did the build along, and I found a place and I decided to put it together. So putting together a few modifications to make it look a little bit better, but not much. So sometimes it's nice to have a kit where you don't have to go through that design process of figuring out all the design stuff yourself.
Mhm.
So not
I know
much else is great.
I don't know if anybody, the folks that aren't interested, but the Golden Spike project of mine, I've gotten a handful of people that are really interested in this. And one of the things that appears to be uh, definition, let's call it, the Golden Spike, you need a layout, you need half a dozen buildings and half a dozen pieces of rolling stock, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things is modifying existing or improving a kit, let's say, or a building. So one of the things that I think I'm going to be working on with Earl is how do you simply modify or add to a structure to make it somewhat unique or somewhat better than the lifelike plastic snap-togethers from our youth. So that's going to be developed probably into another one of these Zoom clinics that we've done a couple of already. But I am impressed in terms of modeling in the coast that people are moving along with their home layouts and that sort of thing. And I'll see if I can get some of them for the show and tell on modeling by on the coast presentation, Phil.
Yeah, that would be great. No, it's amazing what you can do. I've seen a couple of Tom Farrell actually did one where he bought an O-scale switch tower and then redid it and painted it and put new railings on. When he got done, it looks almost as good as a scratch built kit. You can do some amazing stuff. I one of the modules I did, I bought the Woodland Scenics gas station and house buildings, and just weathering them, just basically chalk and pan pastel weathering, and they look much better after you get done with that. So,
yeah.
Yep, it's
in terms of the Golden Spike project, I keep trying to tell everybody it doesn't have to be 125-point contest models. It just has to be an improvement on what comes out of the box and that sort of thing. Because a lot of people are afraid of modeling, it seems. Oh, well, it's so ugly, I don't want to show anybody or something like that. And like you say, Phil, paint, weather, slap on a couple of signs like I always do. And B, you've got a decent layout quality model.
the right answer always is that I build background models. I'm waiting to build foreground models when I get a little older.
Mhm.
So,
I know that, yeah.
exactly. Because once a model, it's interesting. I've got two buildings I've got to build on the layout. My built-in part of my layout, and the buildings you'll never see the back side of them. There's no way unless you physically remove the building from the building.
Mhm.
You would have to climb up on the layout to see the backside. And I just kind of finally realized that, hey, there's just no reason to finish the backside of those buildings. Just put wood on there and don't worry about putting windows and all that stuff on it because
I build my buildings and structures largely on a separate module piece that I can insert into the layout.
yep.
And that way I can see both sides. And I actually model both sides.
Yep. And that's what I've done with everything else I've built. I mean, it's all very detailed on both sides. But I'm looking at those two buildings and I'm thinking about why would I do the back side of them? It's kind of interesting. They kind of become fronts even though they're actually full buildings.
Mhm.
You know, many decades ago, and I mean decades, I worked with Earl Smallshaw in Connecticut. And for those of us who remember the old issues of Model Railroader magazine, Earl always believed there were 4 or 5 models inside every Magnuson or whatever plastic kit box. And he built most amazing cityscapes. Now, this is, remember, we're talking seriously 40 years ago. He built cityscapes, and you'd start with the front of this one, and then you'd move the second one over, like, a little bit to the side, and then you'd have the third one right coming up behind it. And he said, if you can't see it, don't model it.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. And it's a good philosophy. What we used to call kit bashing,
Exactly.
which I guess we still do.
Well, and I think that's the thing is that what you realize is when you try to create that impression, you're doing it from a fixed location. So what you can't see, doesn't necessarily matter to the viewer. It may matter to the builder. That's kind of the so.
Well, Bill,
Well, I guess if you take a look at my background, you see the large building behind me with
Yep.
the thing on the side? That's all there is. There's 2 sides. There's the
Yep.
front and the side. And most of the rest of it is just sheet plastic. In fact, it's not even sheet plastic. It's just a couple of pieces so the thing stands up.
one of the things I've observed is that the older you get, you realize you don't have that much time anymore. And so you don't model the things you can't see because you want to use that time for modeling things you can see.
It's
And so,
absolutely.
yeah, I've got a number of scenes on the railroad where there's 3 sides and no back. And there's one scene where it's 3 sides and no back, except I ended up faking the building as a see-through and put in back windows, and I backlit them with a couple of lights. So if you look through the Chama Depot, you can see in the front windows and then out the back windows. It's some scenery back there. But otherwise, there's nothing behind the building, and there's no detail on the back of the building. All the
Yep.
back is detail on the interior. So yeah, you come up with tricks to try and portray what you want the viewer to see.
One of the things that Phil is very good at, and I do a lot of, is you go on the internet and you download photos of interiors. I've got just a handful of general store kinds of things. Now you can see in the window, and you can see all the shelves with all the cans of everything behind the clerk who's in the desk type of thing. But all the shelves they're obviously just a print. And then you could just put a piece of cardboard behind that and you got the interior finished.
Yeah. Speaking of interiors, I'm looking for any photos of the interior of a Southern Pacific section house, as it would have looked like a fairly large one in the 1950s. Did they have bunk beds? How did they accommodate all of the people who were housed in the section house?
Hmm. Oh, Ken, wouldn't part of that interior furnishing be covered in SP standard plans? I don't have many of the SP ones, but I've got
I
a
don't,
lot of the Rio Grande ones, and they showed, where the bunk beds were positioned and everything else. I mean, it was the plans for these things were, here's the stove, here's the bunk beds, here's the whatever, et cetera. So
thank
it,
you. I'll have to try on the SP group and see if I can see
yeah,
if somebody can give me a CS reference that I can get
yeah,
hold. I've got the track ones, and it's like 70
mhm,
pages of
yeah.
printouts.
Yeah, I'd be willing to make a bet that they even specify which direction you're supposed to sleep in the bed. I mean, those they were pretty anal about their specifications, as I remember correctly. There was a lot of detail.
One of the things I found about SP thing is they specified all that stuff, but people didn't always follow the
Oh my God, what a concept. I don't know. I keep thinking, and I don't have any basis in fact here, but I think of uh, the bunkhouse and I think of, barracks in World War II.
I can remember a 1960s Army barracks very well.
I went to university in the Midwest. I was part of a fraternity house, and it was apparently very common to have what they call sleeping porches. So basically, what you had was your room was more of a living room, and then there was a big room that essentially had bunk beds. And they were steel bunk beds, and the idea was that was where you slept, and then your room was more of a living room. You didn't have to have bunk beds, beds and all that in it, and it was a very interesting environment. You get these guys coming home from the bar at 2 o'clock in the morning drunk and trying to turn over bunk beds, and people were flying right and left. It was very interesting.
Sounds like a lot of personal experience, Phil.
Oh yeah, it was. You remember that scene in Animal House where the guy rides his motorcycle through the fraternity house? That actually happened at the fraternity house I lived at. We had a hallway that came in one end of the building. It was on the lower level where the sleeping porch was above, and it went through the hallway and somebody rode his motorcycle down the hallway one night. Yeah, all those scenes of kind of growing up in that unique. It's interesting. I grew up in Reading, which was a lot like the Valley and what you see in American Graffiti,
Mhm.
and then went to college when it was a lot like Animal House. So I think maybe lived in the greatest time in American and human history for being a young person and in college. I don't know. Maybe a few years later, when two things happened. One, when I went to school, I think there was about 7% of the class was female. My understanding now is if you go to a major university, about 60% of the class is female. So if you're a male, you're in a great situation. There's the two times that in life you want to be a male is in college now, or if you make it in the retirement home to 75 or 80, you're in great shape. Because it turns out there are a lot more women there also. So, well.
Useless tidbit for you, Phil.
You're saying,
We used to tune motorcycles in the halls at the dorm up at MIT. So it wasn't just a Midwest thing.
Yeah.
There you go. Yep.
But it was MIT. We tuned the motorcycles. We didn't just ride through them.
we rode a motorcycle to a theater one time. It's a long story. I'll spare you, but it didn't work very well because it got really smoky and the smoke didn't dissipate.
I rode on the back seat of a friend's motorcycle through a good part of Germany. It was fun.
It's interesting. We have this car show called The Good Guys that
Mhm.
about 3 times a year shows up in Pleasanton, and you don't remember how bad cars smelled
Yeah.
until you get behind a 67 Chevelle
Yeah.
that has no smog equipment. And it's just like all of a sudden, all these memories come back of, oh my God, that's what cars actually smelled like. It's, you don't realize that most of these cars we have now, you can walk up to the exhaust pipe and breathe out of the exhaust pipe, and you probably would be pretty much okay. Some of those cars they bring to the good guys, you get back by the gas pipe, you'll be dead in 2 minutes.
60 tanks.
Yeah. No, it's pretty amazing how you kind of forget how different cars are today in terms of the output versus back then. So, oh well. And then of course they put those engines into rail buses. That's the other thing that must have been interesting was.
How do you mean? Like you think the fumes would get inside the rail bus or what? I'm not sure.
Well, just the fact that it was it was operating with all that smells. There wasn't there the skunk train that was kind of, I think, part of the name of that was that it was very smelly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the same thing, we have a rail bus at the VNT, and it may be forever before it actually runs again, but it's pretty cool. You know, the idea of just popping you could just use a turbo 400 transmission or something in there if you really want to. It's maybe not, but I think it may be a little beefier than that, but I guess the motors are pretty standard though. Like I was surprised
there was one I just happened to see, I turned it on randomly, one of those Mecum auction things, and they had I think it was a Duesenberg that sold in Monterey it was like $1 million car. And it was all original except it had a 6-speed automatic transmission in it.
Oh, why?
Or maybe a manual, but they put a modern transmission in it. They said that was just the single weakest component in the whole car was the transmission.
Has the SP M4000 horsepower Kraus Maffei. Is stored, but they only let one engine run. They don't put through it both engines. Didn't get the second engine running.
Stored
2,000 horsepower. That's all they need.
Well, that was such a great. I told this story, but we went there to the Miles Canyon for the trip, and they talked about that locomotive, and it's such an interesting story because it's a cultural story. Right. So, the SP and the Rio Grande had the problem of the Sierras and the Rockies to get through. And the Chiclet engines that EMD was building, the 1,500 horsepower Chiclets. The thing, and I didn't realize this, that diesel engines and steam engines are different in how they apply torque. As a diesel engine increases in speed, the torque you can provide from the engine decreases. So if you want to run a train at 50 miles an hour, you need 6 engines. If you want to run the same train at 70 miles an hour, you need 10, because the diesel engines lose torque power as they increase in speed. And so they went to EMD, and EMD said, well, we can sell all we've got. We don't know any reason to build more powerful locomotives. So they found this engine that was built by Kraus Maffei for the German railroads to run through the Alps. And it was, it's a great story because it's a dual engine, smaller diesel turbocharged. Back when, if you ever seen the pistons inside of an EM or a GP35, the pistons are like this big around. They look like dinner plates going up and down. They're huge. And they had this smaller, higher speed, dual turbocharged diesel engine. And then it was diesel hydraulic. Right. So it wasn't diesel electric, it's diesel hydraulic. So it's a whole different, literally a whole different concept. And then to make matters worse, it was metric. Yeah. This is 1960. Do you know what metric was in 1960? It was a communist plot to destroy America.
Yeah.
I'm actually serious. There were people that wouldn't touch a metric tool because if you touched it, you'd become a communist immediately. And so they looked at it, they decided they were great, 4,000 horsepower, They bought one. It pulled amazingly. It was much better than the EMD units for that. So they decided and they bought 10 of them. And they got them over here and they started using them. They were great. Of course, the first problem they found was that when you run them out in the desert, those big windows that are really impressive and nice in the Alps, they just cook the crew. So if you look at them, they made all the windows narrow or made them smaller because they wanted less heat in the engine in the crew compartment. But then the final story was shown. They started having maintenance problems and things started going wrong. And they called the Germans up, and the Germans go, "Oh, we don't have these problems in Germany. We don't know what you're doing wrong. We don't understand." So finally, after a few months, they sent a crew of maintenance people to Germany to make sure they understood what they were doing differently. And they figured out that the Germans ran this engine through the Alps, and they would spend 4 to 6 hours servicing it before they ran it back through the Alps the other way. And of course, the Americans said, "But wait a second, we service our engines once a year, whether they need it or not. We don't service them all the time like that. We service them regularly." And of course, the moral of the story is that they were used to buying Chevrolets and they bought a BMW and they were surprised by the maintenance costs.
Yeah.
It's just typical cultural story, right? Yeah. So apparently that was a very interesting outcome that they were too finicky to maintain. But it's going to be cool to have that one in the canyon. It's the only one left, as I understand it. I don't. Did you hear the story about
And that engine is beautiful. You go out, the way they've restored it, it is
Yep.
the best pieces of restoration you'll ever see.
They had, I think it was the power truck, or there was one piece they had that they couldn't get for it, that they didn't have and had to be rebuilt. And they contacted the company in Germany that built it for Kraus Maffei and said, "Hey, we got this problem. We really need this." And they actually built it and I think shipped it for free.
He built a whole truck for them.
Though they built the whole thing, the German company that built it originally was so excited that they were rebuilding the engine that they did the whole thing for free. So yeah, it's pretty cool. That's one of the nice things about those tours. Every time I go on one of those tours, you learn something that's interesting that you never would have learned any other way.
So speaking of rebuild, Phil, the C-16 number 223 is going to be restored. So the cool part about that is a corporation was formed to do that. The city of Ogden basically said, "Okay, we'll turn the engine over to you guys on that." And so they're in the process now of trying to raise funds. Its permanent home will be the Colorado Railroad Museum when they get that done. But otherwise, they get it done. They plan on running it on the Cumbers and Toltec, of course, along with the other vintage engines and things of this sort. So that was a real feat. And this was something that was pulled off by Jimmy Booth of PBL and Ray Bergeron, who is headed up an organization called the C-16 Society. And like I said, the thing is now under the auspices of the Locomotive 223 Foundation. And they're open for contributions. If anybody has a lot of money left over at the end of this year, I'm sure they would welcome it. So yeah, the business of rebuilding locomotives in the U.S. is still alive and well, which is just absolutely great news for us guys that like history.
Yep. Well, and actually, the Ardenwood folks are raising money they've got a porter that I think it's a porter they're rebuilding.
Yeah, well, actually, it's the Kiso engine.
Right, the Kiso. Yep.
Yeah, that'll be a real unique piece of equipment when they get that going. It's pretty neat. Yeah, I saw it run up at Henry Sorensen's when he had it.
Yep.
Now's Canyon still working on 1744, the SP M6 Mogul, and they've also got a one of the Pacifics that they have to keep running now.
No, it's good. It's definitely a good time for rebuilding things.
I'll just interject on part of the layout design ops meet coming up. Primarily the layout design contest. What was chosen to be the subject of the contest this year is actually the Lenson Street engine facilities of the SP in San Jose. So that is just, it's in its heyday. That was a pretty amazing operation. Of course, it's all gone now, and it's all been taken over by the light rail stuff. So, or not light rail, but the Caltrain Peninsula service. So, otherwise, if you like designing for large strings of mountains and northerns and cab forwards and things of this sort, this facility would really be something to take a shot at. You can find information on the design contest on the Layout Design Ops webpage. And if you need more information, you can send an email to Bruce Morgan and he'll send it to you.
If you want to do it in real life, Niles Canyon has all the bricks from 6 stalls of the Lenson plus
Yeah,
the turntable.
yeah, yeah. Here we go.
So this is
Yeah, it's the overhead there. Yeah, that engine house went from somewhere around 7 stalls, expanded up to 15, and then was torn back to about 7 at the end of its life before the Loma Prieta earthquake made it unsafe and it had to come down.
yeah, so that'll be that's always a fun event.
Yep.
And Jim, that's something you can do virtually. That's one of the cool things. That one, trying to do a few things virtually so people can see it and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's the challenge is, you look at the PCR, it's hard for somebody who lives in Redding to get down to an event in Santa Clara. If you think about it, to do an event like that, you probably have to do 2 days in a hotel, and that gets to be a bit much for a weekend. So doing a virtual is kind of nice. You can add on. You miss the layouts, operations, obviously, because you can't physically be there. So,
yeah, I really appreciate the virtual convention that I've attended the last couple of years. That's been great.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, it works out really well from that perspective. So.
Well, I didn't realize how big your region was until you said something. I just looked at your map, and I didn't realize that you covered like all of Northern California and all of Northern Nevada. And so, is that right? Yeah,
and Hawaii,
And Hawaii.
and
Wow.
and I have been trying for years to suggest we should have a meet in Hawaii, and obviously the leadership of the division should have to be flown there on divisional funds for the meeting.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to convince anybody yet that we should do that.
I vote yes. I vote yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's a challenge. And the challenge is like the guys in Hawaii, they complain about this because this starts at like 6 a.m. There's 3 hours time difference, I think, to Honolulu. And so this is, for them, it's 6 a.m. It's hard to get them to get up at 6 a.m. for this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we have the same thing here in Utah. Everything's kind of spread out. So like I do some organizing in a different arena of some school, like some Georgia Tech students. We try to organize meetups for them, and just trying to get people to show up in person is really difficult. But you run a virtual meetup, and you'll get a lot more people.
Yep.
And this is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It has been a challenge getting people to come and getting people from the South Bay to come up to the North Bay or vice versa from the North Bay to the South Bay. I mean, the thing that we do that consistently gets people to come out in the largest numbers is the auction. I mean, and by the way, I guess we haven't talked since the auction. So just the good news on the auction, I haven't gotten the final numbers from Stephen, but I think we were reasonably positive on this auction because of Kevin Shanahan's donations. Those sold very well. And actually helped us make money on the auction for the first time probably in 3 years. So that was good, and we will have another auction in May. We have some more stuff from donations, and definitely looking for more donations as we move forward. The The other thing, by the way, we did the Great Train Show. We had a booth there at our tabletop booth thing set up, and we got 10 new members. Of the 10 new members, 5 were actually not in the Coast Division. 5 were actually at either Sierra or Daylight. So actually Sierra Red and Daylight, all 3. So one of the things clear is the train shows that down here in the Bay Area are getting people to come from outside the Bay Area into the train shows. So
one of the things, having been busy selling the Coast Division, etc., at the train show, I got 2 preteens that I got their parents to join, and I made a mistake. I did not identify who these people were to follow up with the kids. But I think that, we keep talking about there aren't any younger members, and there are some people that have seen 8 decades already, and we need those people, we need new blood kind of thing. And there it was. And so I think that maybe we should take a look, if we can, at the people that registered and see if we can identify who had the kids, and then reach out to them separately. Then, welcome to the Coast Division, and show up to Santa Clara next year, or whatever.
Yeah,
So just a suggestion.
Well, it might not be a bad idea to reach out to everybody that registered.
Yep.
Especially
Well,
the
I know.
but everybody to get them on board versus them saying, "Well, I joined and nothing happened and nobody contacted me." And
Well, no, Phil is all over that. He's got a procedure.
So they got an email. So everybody who was at the event there actually got the same email you guys got for this, that actually apparently had the wrong email link on it, which is a problem for them. But it actually it was the same thing, but had a precursor email that says welcome to the PCR, and had some other stuff about some of the events coming up and that. But you're right. One of the things I actually talked about was if people would be willing to become a new member mentor. The idea is just get assigned someone and call them and say hi, meet them. I mean, one of the things I did notice when I joined the NMRA, and I joined in 2018, there was 0 onboarding. I got a card in I got a card in the mail about going to the about an auction, but that was about it. So we're trying to make it a little bit better. Sydney also contacts people. Sydney is our membership chair, so she's doing some of that for us. But you're right. Anybody would like to be a mentor name, I will pass a name along and you can give them a call. So
do you guys mind if I ask? Like, I don't want to just divert from an agenda if we're on an agenda here or anything like that. But
no.
So I mean, let me think of where to come at this from. So if you look at any civic organization these days, whether it be the Elks, or the American Legion or a model railroad club, there's sort of an existential crisis in terms of, like, every club I've been around has been I'm 58, and I notice everybody's at least as old as me, and there's not a lot of young kids getting into it. And I worry that it's because of the train sims and the video games and stuff. And I was wondering if you guys, I've actually asked the NMRA about this and never gotten an answer, and asked around locally and kind of just get no answer. But have you guys ever considered, reaching out to people that play train sims and trying to get them involved in modeling?
So I think there are 2 kind of issues here. The existential issue, personally, I think is very interesting. So ask yourself a question: are you a model railroader or a railroad modeler?
Oh, interesting. I mean,
Right.
personally, I'm a
So,
real fan. Personally, I'm actually
right.
not
So
a modeler, but yeah.
exactly. So it turns out almost all model railroaders, and I have this concept of big, you're either a big modeler or a big railroader, big R, big M. So,
Oh yeah.
some people were rail fans. They just were excited about railroads. Railroads were really cool. And they found model railroading as a way to express their rail faniness.
Hmm.
And so that's one group of people, or one way you got into the hobby. The other way that a lot of people got into the hobby was they were modelers. So they built a model. You built that plastic airplane model. You built it really nicely. You put it up on the shelf. And 2 or 3 weeks later, you walked in, you looked at it. You know what? It was still sitting on the shelf. It hadn't moved. And a few weeks later, it was still sitting on the shelf. It hadn't moved. And you realized, you know what? It's pretty damn boring. It just sits on the shelf. It doesn't. I'm actually serious. I mean, you got to think about this. This is
No,
8-year-old mentality, right? And so then you go to the hobby shop, and they have a model railroad display, and things are moving, and you're creating scenes, and it's more interesting. And so I think, another group of people got into the hobby because of the animation that you had in trains and the scenes you could create and the modeling, that it was a great way to be a modeler. The problem today, I think, it's just a fundamental problem is, if you think about 1960, when a lot of us got into the hobby, what were the options in modeling? Think about it today. That airplane doesn't work. Well, go in and buy the $30 RC or $50 RC plane, or buy the RC tank or the RC car, or there's animation in virtually everything else now. So I think a lot of the modelers that we used to get coming into trains because it was a great way to model now go off into other things.
interesting.
Conversely, I mean,
That's a good perspective.
I am the generation that didn't ride on trains. I mean, I grew up in Reading. I grew up, in the 60s in Reading. We never took the train to the Bay Area. We always drove to the Bay Area.
Sure, yeah.
I did not take a passenger train trip until I was an adult.
That might be true for me. I'd have to think about that actually.
And so the only trains I saw, I lived in Reading, and there's that big trestle that runs over the Sacramento River downtown Reading, and underneath there was a thing called Kittyland, which was a kids amusement park run by the wise men of the YMCA. And I used to work there with my dad, and you could see the trains go on the trestle. Literally, that is the only memory I have of a child of being exposed to trains.
Interesting.
So,
if you go back, well, I'm sorry to interrupt you real quick. If you go back another generation or two, then everybody was involved in trains. I mean, what was it? 20% of the workforce to be involved in trains.
Well, and trains were regularly in your community. They were delivering cars to businesses that were around it. But think about the kids that grew up in the 80s and 90s or the 2000s.
Right.
The kids that are today in their 20s, where were the trains that they saw?
I mean, it might be coming back in terms of light rail and in terms of intercity trains, becoming, like the whole global warming thing, pushing people to public transport, that might be bringing it back in that a little bit. But you're right. I guess so have you guys figured out then where are you going to get the new crop of people from?
Well, I think I mean, the whole perspective here is it's like everything else, it's percentages. So I think the percentages coming into the hobby have dropped. Obviously, the population is much larger, so the resulting percentage may not be that different. Okay. I mean, so that's the first thing is that, I think there's a smaller percentage of people coming into the hobby. The other thing, of course, with this hobby is it's always been the case that I think 70%, maybe 80% of modelers are basically by life modelers, right? They got into model railroading when they were kids. They got out of it with cars and girls came along, and then family and children and work came along. And basically from, early 20s to late 40s, early 50s, there's a block of time where model railroading falls off the agenda for most people. I mean, it was for me. I don't know about other people. It sure was for me. I'm always envious of the guys who stayed in model railroading all those years, but I got back into it in 85 and it lasted until 95 and my job changed and there was no time for model railroading for 15 years. And so I think, I think that happens. And that's why we see a lot of people coming back into model railroading in their 50s, because those are people that are looking for what I'm going to call, for lack of a better word, is a retirement avocation.
And
Mhm.
a nostalgic one, perhaps. Yeah. Because maybe,
Yeah. And yeah. And by the way, you guys have heard me. I'm an evangelist about how I think model railroading for men is a great avocation as you get older, because it gives you a purpose and a focus, and it gives you great social networks, which are the two key things to living. And the worst thing you can happen in life is to have no focus and have no friends.
right.
Then all you do is sit around and watch TV and die. I mean,
Yeah,
to be
that's
very frank.
good point. Well, and I
So
think that you're right, because it is different for women. I mean, it's not popular to say that these days, but I think you kind of focus on this being a hobby for men. But I mean, there certainly are some women that like to get involved, but they don't seem to do it as much.
yeah, it is, but again, I think it's and I think it's okay. And this will Jesse will reflect this at the trade shows. The focus we've had is not to sell model railroading per se. I mean, to me, that's what the whole trade show is about. Our focus is to find model railroaders and sell them on joining the NMRA.
Sure.
And by the way, for if you're a model railroader and you're not a member of the NMRA, my personal view is you've made one of the worst life decisions you can make by not joining the NMRA. And I say that, by the way,
Yeah.
because when I was a model railroader from 85 to 95, I never joined the NMRA. And there are a few regrets I have in life, and that's actually a significant regret, because I meet people today that, Jack Burgess and guys like that were NMRA members, and I would have met them. I probably would have known Dave 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if I'd stayed in the NMRA, but I had joined the NMRA and been an NMRA member. It's actually a personal regret, because I see it as being a significant way to build, that community, your social community outside of work. I mean, my social community was outside of family was 90% work, if not more.
Yeah.
And, because you end up in a job where I was in a, 200,000 mile a year or 80-hour a week job for 15
wow.
years.
Wow.
So, and everything becomes around work.
Yeah, well, especially
And
80 hours a week. And actually, that's not uncommon for people in Silicon Valley these days.
that was a Silicon Valley, it was a CTO job in Silicon Valley. That's what you end up with. And by the way, don't think of it as a drudge. It's not a drudge. It was incredible fun.
Sure.
But what was interesting, all those work friends that were really good work friends,
They're
there's
gone.
there's a key word in that work friends. It's
Yeah.
work, and it's first, right? It's not friends work, it's work friends. Work comes first. And when work goes away, work friends go away to a great extent. Very few of those folks, you think about it, very few of the folks that were your work friends stay your friends after you're not working anymore.
Mhm.
And by the way, if you search, go on Google and just search, U.S. men loneliness, that phrase, and you'll find a huge amount of data coming back about that there's a loneliness epidemic among men. And it's because you wake up and you're 70 years old, you retire, and you realize you don't have any friends outside of work and family, and you didn't have grandkids, so you don't have grandkids to take care of.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
No, that's
I'm sorry. It is, but we did good. We did reasonably good recruiting at the Great Train Show. We've been doing it now for about 2 years, so the numbers tail off, because it turns out the pool of people we're talking to really doesn't change that much. You get a few new modelers every year, not that many.
I mean, how was the Great Train Show? Where was it out there, in Santa Clara or something, or where?
It was at the fairgrounds in Pleasanton.
Okay,
they
gotcha.
did. They used to do it at the fairgrounds in Pleasant, and then they were doing it for a while at the fairgrounds in San Jose. But last year they had a big blow up with the fairgrounds in San Jose. I don't know exactly what happened.
Oh, wow.
This year they're going to Vacaville.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Or
Well, I mean,
Vallejo.
that way they can grab the Sacramento crowd too. So maybe there's
Yeah.
there too. But I mean, Marine World did that move many years ago. So
Yeah. Well, they do one in Sacramento also. There's one in Sacramento in February. So there's three
there
out
is.
here.
Okay, gotcha.
There's basically there's Pleasanton, then there's Vallejo, and then there's Sacramento. So
Was it a good show? Because like we had one that was, it was a very cold, dreary day in Salt Lake City, and so maybe that affected it. But it just wasn't a very well attended show this year in Salt Lake last year, this year. I forget when
yeah,
it was.
I thought it was pretty well attended. The guys I talked to who were vendors seemed to feel they did really well,
Well, that's good.
fairly well. So
Yeah, I know we've had some challenges here in Utah. I know I was involved with marketing a train show for the local NMRA, region or the
yep,
chapter. What's the right term for it? The Utah people, the Northern
the division probably.
Division. Thank you. Yeah, and I helped them. We actually got them on a local morning show, and it was kind of interesting. They got some pretty good exposure, but they just had really low ticket sales, and the vendors didn't really do very well. And we heard that from a couple of other trade and craft oriented shows out here in Utah. Over the last couple of years, that things are not doing so well. But I think out there in California, you guys have got a lot of money still, so I think you're
Yeah,
probably weather any kind of problems here.
yeah, it's a
That's
bigger population. So
Yeah, well, and a much more rich population for sure. Um, well, I mean, just like because I'm in the IT business, so like I know what people make here in Utah, and then I work with a lot of guys from the East Coast and from out there in California, and these guys are making easy 2, 3, $500,000 a year or something, and when I was growing up, that was just completely unimaginable money, and then now it's actually attainable, for the
yeah.
average guy. It's interesting, but yeah,
Oh
so
well.
so
But
can
then
I?
when a house costs $2 million,
It's nuts. Yeah.
it's interesting. We have some friends that their son and daughter have a house in Redwood City, and they've been trying to buy a new house.
Mhm.
And you go through the math when you buy a $3 million house and try to keep your existing house, even if
Yeah.
you've got $1 million to put down,
Right.
$2 million at 6%. You
Yeah,
got to go through the math. That's $120,000 a year. By the time you add that and your taxes and your insurance up, you're into your house for about 15 grand a month.
Yeah.
You got to stop, and that's cash, and you don't get any of it back on taxes. It's gotten craziness.
Well, I hear the insurance rates are really getting jacked up out there in California.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think we've gotten hit so bad here, but so let me just focus for 1 second, just to kind of get your guys' perspective. Like, what do you guys actually think of virtual, the like video games, the train simulators? Do you kind of laugh at them? I mean, be honest with me. Like, are they kind of a joke in the model railroad world, or do you take those people seriously at all? Or like, I wonder. I just think that there's a big audience there that might be able to be converted into modelers, and I wonder if anyone else agrees with me.
actually, I know a number of people that are both. They do the train sim stuff, and they model on that. And there's some really good train sim stuff being done, at least in the narrow gauge world. It's just absolutely amazing. And strangely enough, as a company, and I can't remember who they are, that is doing that, usually shows up at the narrow gauge conventions with what they've been doing with the Denver and Rio Grande and the Denver and South Park and Pacific Railroad, and it is fascinating stuff.
Huh?
And they usually have a pretty big crowd around the table, and they'll hand a controller to a passerby and say, "Here, give it a go." And so that they're out recruiting legions to train sim there.
Well, that's
All
encouraging.
around them, you have other folks, hawking the hardware, and it's actually pretty cool. So I don't think there's a contention between the two of them. The other thing I'll observe is several of my friends that have been in narrow gauge, they used to be builders, are now running train sim because they're way up there in age, and they just said, my building skills, my motor skills, and everything are such that
Hmm.
to build a model was just too frustrating, but I can do train sim and still enjoy the hobby. So
That's interesting. That's a good point.
Well,
And then train. Yeah. Sorry.
I think it's really important to think about that. If you take a step back to another one of the Phillyisms, I always think about that there are four kind of aspects to the hobby. There's building and building everything, whether you're building structures or layouts or cars or locomotives, but you're building stuff. You're physically in the process of making something that gets completed.
Right.
There's basically running trains, virtue call it for lack of a better word, model rail fanning. A lot of people create a layout and they just like to see the trains run through the scenery. There's
I got.
collecting. there's a lot of people that have the collecting bug, and it's not just model railroading, it's the collecting bug in general, and they collect. And then there's the last group, which are the folks who want to operate, which is that idea of simulating a railroad environment. So, what's interesting is that if you look at the sim side of the hobby, it really is that simulating, that operation side of things. And, what's really interesting is there's kind of this analogy, which is every time you go to a train convention, or especially an operations oriented thing, you almost always see that one layout that we would call a plywood Pacific. But from an operations perspective, it's perfect.
Huh.
Right? It's got all the sidings, they're all well labeled, it's got all the car cards. It simulates a railroad from a simulation perspective perfectly, but in fact, it's really just a bitch plywood with rails on it. So,
yeah, right.
What's interesting is that you can get that simulation experience virtually, or you can get it by doing it on a layout. And then, there are people I'm sure will make the argument that great scenery doesn't enhance an operating session whatsoever. And if anything, it gets in the way because it makes it harder to uncouple the cars. I'm being a bit facetious there, but it is kind of true. And again, for those folks, I think the sim-based operations is great. And by the way, operations is another thing that I think from the hobby is interesting, in that when you build stuff, it's kind of the strategic part of your brain that works, right? How am I going to build this? What materials am I going to use? How am I going to fit it into the layout? There's a whole bunch of planning and thought process. Operations is just the opposite, right? It's tactical thinking, right? I've got a train. I've got to figure out what in the hell to do with these cars, and what cars to pick up, and what order it is, and how not to screw it up. And I got to do that immediately right now. I can't cogitate and spend 2 days thinking about it. I got to come to a conclusion in 5 minutes. And by the way, it's a different part of your brain that gets activated. That's what I think is the beauty of operations and building, is there are actually different parts of your brain that get used. And keeping all your brain working is important.
Yeah, Phil, I'd like to counter that a little bit. I think when you described the operation, that was from the train operator's viewpoint. From the layout owner's
it's a huge,
owning and operating a railroad, that is a strategic endeavor to do.
Absolutely.
That. So
absolutely. And to some extent, the dispatcher is a little bit more strategic than somebody who's actually running a specific train. But you're right, and it's a different set of thought processes, and it causes you to, and all that is good, because we lose that. We tend to become less thoughtful, I think, as we get older. We don't have the challenges of being thoughtful.
I'll have to watch out here.
Yeah, well, you don't have the same challenge you do as when you're working. And a lot of people, regardless of what you did as a job, a lot of jobs were take some information, figure out what to do, and go do it.
Right.
Whether you're a repair guy repairing a car, or you're building a company, it's always, in many ways, it's the same kind of thought processes. And what's interesting is when you retire, they all go away because you don't have the same challenges anymore.
Sure, right.
But anyway.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to retiring someday. We'll see when that happens. But like, I guess for me, I'm always working on computer side projects. So I imagine that into my retirement, as long as they can, until they like drag my wheelchair away from my keyboard, I'll be working on something. But that's a good point, because I think for a lot of people, you're right. I mean, like I'm a contractor. I'm an independent contractor. So for me, there's no 9 to 5. There's no like, oh, it's Saturday, I can take the day off. Like there's just a constant pressure to get things done, and then I have to force myself to relax, and so I think that retirement may be a little different for me. But it's an interesting perspective that you just gave there, because I think you're right. Most people are, they're into such a routine, and I think it's just a shock to retire, and then what do I do now?
Yeah.
And then how do I survive?
So one of the things on that is I've been retired since 2016, and this is the best gig I've ever had. So
right on.
Well, it turns out I'm up in my eyeballs. I'm over-promising and under-delivering, which is sort of like on the job.
Right.
And you're always doing that sort of stuff. But I haven't ever been bored. And the big difference between this and employment, in particular working for a major corporation, is the stuff you work on is of your choosing. not theirs, which makes it
Yeah.
a whole lot more fun. But as far as thinking and the planning and the challenge, I don't think that's gone away. I've probably my most productive model building years have been since I retired, aided and
Huh.
abetted by COVID, believe it or not. But out of that, as I got, I ended up with a couple of contests, or I'm going to say really high merit award certificates on that toward the MMR, and articles in magazines and things of this sort. So for me, it's been fun, and the whole business of how do you approach this model when you have no idea how to build it? And you've got to go through the material selection and what are you going to do? And you end up running tests on things to see what works and what doesn't work. You end up making a lot of mistakes, just like on the job, backing out and saying, well, I got to try another approach because this thing, just wasn't going to pay off. So I've really enjoyed this part. And I think well, one of the things I did strategically when I changed companies back in the early '80s is I conscientiously decided I wasn't going to focus on work friends, as Phil called them. I decided what I was going to do is I was going to focus on friends outside of work, and that ended up being primarily other model railroaders. And so
Yep.
that gave me a great community, to run through this with. It gave me a good perspective on work and what it was worth. And so when I stepped off the merry-go-round, it was no problem. I didn't wonder what to do for a day. I just got up every day and said, "This is great." So it, it's just a different perspective on how these things go. So it hasn't been scary at all, and I wouldn't. I don't think you need to be afraid of the future.
Well, let's hope not. If the economy worries me a bit in the long run, but then
Well,
I've been waiting for the crash for 40 years now, and it hasn't happened yet. So, maybe it'll never happen.
well, those are things we can't control. So
Well, you can
they
in a
could
certain sense
happen, but
of
I
diversifying.
don't worry about them. You plan for them to happen, and you hope they don't. So
Well, that's true. I guess I should take that perspective. I mean, to me, it's like you can't actually worry about like if the dollar is going to go out, there are other places to be. So, but yeah, it's just when's that? I just like I said, my joke is that I've been waiting for the big stock market crash for a long time, and it's like, it's I mean, they had one 100 years ago now, so maybe it won't happen here.
huh.
But well, I appreciate the time with you guys. I know I'm just some guy from Utah that just popped in here, but
No,
I
that's
yeah.
well, and that's why, by the way, you saw the Friends of the PCR thing. We actually are about ready to get that closed off and start. We're
Mhm.
purging. We're one of the problems we have is our constant contact database is approaching the 2,500 limit
Oh
that
yeah,
we have on our contract.
right.
And it
You don't want
turns
to pay.
out, yeah, it turns out that a lot of those came from like when we did the national convention, we had, 750 people that we added into our roles. And so we're basically going and saying, if you don't want to get emails from us, we're going to stop sending them. So you sign up for them.
No, that's really
And,
smart, actually. Yeah, I mean, I
and
don't
that
know.
was,
I assume you guys have an email marketing expert there somewhere, but that's actually a real pro move because what happens is as you keep on sending to those emails that people that ignore them or maybe even mark them spam, then you lose quality on your reputation of
yeah,
your email sender.
yeah,
And yeah, it's really smart to call your list every once in a while.
exactly.
I've got
So
I've got
we're
a
in,
client that I can't talk into that right now, and it's really frustrating.
yeah, we're going through that process of, everybody who was on the list got 3 emails and said, here's a simple form to sign up to get emails in the future. And if you don't, you're not going to get emails.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't care. There were a lot of people, who are from Florida or from Virginia that came to the national convention, and they really don't care to get PCR emails anymore. I mean, between us, I would be horrified if I got emails from every division in the NMRA. Can you imagine getting 120 divisions worth of emails? You'd literally, I have so many emails already, I'd probably go up by 50% just because of those numbers of emails.
Yeah, definitely.
And we use email as the primary way to communicate. We lost our editor for our newsletter, but I'm not 100% sure that a newsletter really buys us anything as a division. We have a
Mhm.
regional newsletter, so we'll just try to use our weekly, bi-weekly emails so everybody kind of keeps up on things.
Yeah.
Right on. Hey, I'm gonna jump here, guys. It's again very nice to
Cool.
meet you. I'll see you again in
Okay.
the
It was
future.
nice meeting you. Come join us again. We're
Yeah, Happy New Year. We'll see y'all later. Bye.
Happy New Year to all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to call it too. I got to get going on some stuff. We will see everyone in the new year. I think January 7th is our next get together. So that's 2 weeks from today. I think we slid a week through the process the last couple of weeks, but I think that's okay. We'll just stay on this schedule, and everybody have a happy new year, and we'll see you next year.
Okay, same to you, Phil.
Thanks, guys.
Richie.
Have a good one. Bye now.